Thank you all for sticking around. Last one of the day, so you're a great crowd. My name is Brian Beach. I'm Senior Product Director for Syniverse, and I'm going to be talking about our submission, Evolve Mobility, 3G to VoLTE roaming interworking. So for thousands of years, humans have looked to the moon in wonder. And they wondered what it would be like to walk on the surface. But for so long, that dream was simply impossible to achieve, too far out of reach. But in 1962, John F. Kennedy, the 35th President of the United States, made a bold statement. He said, "We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon by the end of this decade, not because it is easy, but because it is hard." Unfortunately, he was not alive to see it, but in 1969, we achieved that goal. And that represented one of the greatest innovations in technology that the world had ever seen. Part of that was because they didn't just do what was new, it was extremely hard. The mobile industry right now is in a going to the moon moment. You mentioned SMS being one of those, but I feel that 5G is another going to the moon moment for the mobile industry. Now, by moving to 5G, this has put operators in an awkward position in some ways. Why? As you heard Matthew talk about, there are 3G sunsets going around the world. This is very important because spectrum is extremely expensive, so they want to refarm that spectrum to 5G. That helps control their costs. Some operators are also choosing to do away with their legacy network equipment, but at what cost? Doing either of these things creates a gap. Resolving the 3G to VoLTE roaming gap is extremely important. But because this gap is so large, some operators have actually considered delaying their 5G rollout. So what are some of the things that are preventing operators from boldly going forward into 5G? Well, number one, the inbound roaming that could be lost when the rest of the world does not support VoLTE yet. And I say that, obviously, there's some operators that do, but when you look at the stats, 237 or so have VoLTE, maybe 50 to 60 are doing VoLTE roaming, and out of those, they may only have 10, 15, 20, or 30 if they're very forward-thinking VoLTE agreements. That means, out of 750 operators, you're left with the vast majority of the world that cannot roam into your network for voice. This also, if you want to retire the network equipment, can lead to very poor outbound roaming experience for your own home subscribers, which is a very different conversation because it's one thing to decide to focus on 80% inbound roaming. It's another that says now a large percentage of my home subscribers may be impacted. This is the antithesis or the opposite of what 5G is supposed to promise, right? 5G is supposed to be better, faster, better customer experience, but yet in doing that, in rushing toward that, creating this gap could have the opposite of effect. So what are the operators to do? Are they simply going to just wait until the world gets VoLTE? How long will that take, and how much will that cost them? Some in the industry thought that coming up with a solution might be far too difficult. Even within the GSMA, who put together a VoLTE task force, there were many, that believed an interworking function that sits between 3G and VoLTE would simply be too complicated to be feasible. Well, I'm here today to talk to you about what we did, Evolve Mobility. We chose to do this knowing the complexities and how hard it would be, but thankfully to the operators, we hide those complexities so that it's plug and play. So what is Evolve Mobility? This is a 3G to VoLTE interworking specifically for inbound roaming for those operators that have sunsetted their legacy RAN. This allows them to recover lost revenues, and in fact, if you're a greenfield or an ex-CDMA operator, it gives you a different benefit. It allows you to now level the playing field. You can bring in a lot more roaming partners than you used to be able to. Now, I want to talk about core axioms. If you're not familiar with that term, an axiom is something you can't prove, but it's a statement understood to be true. We believe the core axioms for this service is that you don't just put together a blueprint and hope for the best. You have to make it practical for the world. How do you make it practical? Number one, you cannot expect either the home or the visitor to make any changes to their network. The operator who's sunsetted, they're fully committed to 5G. They don't want to have to change things in their network to make it happen. And the home operator that's been reluctant to move to VoLTE roaming, you can't expect them to make changes either. Everybody gets to roam the way they see it. It's not just important to interwork the protocols. Obviously, you have to do that. But just as important, possibly more, is you have to be able to interwork the clearing. Without the clearing, there's no business. Without no business, what does it matter? I contend that a cloud deployment allows you to focus on your 5G deployment and allow Syniverse to manage this on your behalf. This allows us to be very nimble, and as a multi-tenant platform, it means that operator A, B, and C could all be consumers of this, sharing some of the same home operators with none of that data being contaminated. Now, a cloud deployment also means the commercials reflect that. So, just like VoLTE, you have so much VoLTE and it's going to grow over time, you might onboard 100 different operators on this platform, but over time, you're going to start chipping away and you're going to start getting your own bilateral relationships. So, commercially, it's very important to reflect that as well. I would also say that Matthew, I keep pointing at him, but he pointed out, rightfully so, I think, that testing. People ask, what is the biggest problem with this? The platform itself works fine. There's still nothing that replaces human testing. So we have a whole team of iRig and TATIC testers to go and help these HPLMNs onboard the platform. It's important to note that once they're onboarded to the VPLMN, they're a VoLTE roamer. We do the VoLTE testing. What that means is you might have all these 237 VoLTE operators who don't do VoLTE roaming yet. They can onboard on this platform in a temporary manner, and once they figure out, for whatever reason, why they haven't been roaming, it's very easy for us to switch them to a bilateral. So how is it going? We launched this product February of 2022. AT&T became the first customer, basically at the same time that they announced their 3G sunset. And then Verizon Wireless was quickly to follow. So two of the largest Tier 1 operators in the world. This means we're doing about 1.2 million unique roamers a month, 6 million minutes of use, and about 22 million or so SMSs. We've got 16,000 device types, makes, and models currently registered on the platform, over 100 different HPLMNs onboarded. We're going to shoot for 250, but we've already accomplished over 100 in approximately a year. I'll also say that this is not a US-centric platform. We are signing 3 operators in Asia Pacific and 3 more in North America, none of which are in the US proper. So it's becoming a global platform service. Briefly, I will just touch that inbound roaming is the first problem to solve. That's when they want to sunset the RAN. The second problem is now they're left with all this equipment that they really don't want to have to manage because they'd rather make room for 5G. But how are they going to do that if their home subscribers can't outbound roam to the rest of the world that do not support VoLTE? So we came up with Evolved Mobility for Outbound, which addresses this need. And similar, it's like the reverse. But just think of that, in this case, it's the home that is the customer who has sunsetted the legacy equipment, and the visited is a 3G operator. But adhering to these core axioms is important, both for inbound and outbound. We believe fervently that you cannot require either side to make touches You have to ensure flexibility in the platform, multi-tenancy. The commercials have to reflect that. You have to have visibility for troubleshooting. And finally, the team of testers. So we chose to do what others believe to be too hard. And I'll just conclude by saying, just like the lunar mission broke down barriers and opened the way for space exploration, Evolve Mobility is breaking down the barriers that operators are seeing in moving to 5G and beyond. With that, I hand it over to the Lions. Thank you.
Right, over to the Lions.
My first question, can you please explain for us how the system handled the subscriber identification, authentication, and the mobility management?
Yes, so mobility management, the visited MME will send back diameter signaling. Part of the key here, not making any side to make a change, is that when we are in the path of that diameter, when we retrieve that response, we can send the IMS APN to us. Now, once that happens, a SIP registration occurs. That's inner working function that you can't buy off the shelf because we designed it and built it. We'll then send an authentication request to the HLR to get authenticated. Actually, now that I think about it, it's prior to the SIP registration. So it is during the network attach that our inner working function gets invoked. And so to the home operator, we send all the traffic S7. So we're sending it to the HLR. We get back the authentication. We get back all the supplementary services. And so we can mirror a true 3G-like inbound roamer.
I need just a clarification. If I'm operator X and I'm going to USA under AT&T network, I don't have VoLTE roaming with AT&T. My subscriber can attach to AT&T network in USA. If this is right? Because AT&T have the solution.
Yes, so, and we have with AT&T over 70, 75 different operators today. The other I mentioned was Verizon, but yes, if AT&T has made an agreement with that HPLMN. We don't just assume that everybody's going to roam onto our platform. We step out of that negotiation. So AT&T still has to manage, or whoever the VPLMN has to still manage their roaming relationship. So it's important because in our position, our customer would be AT&T, and we provide 100% control to them to manage that.
This is a very important point for me because I feel this personally. So that's why I need an answer for this. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Go first. First of all, excellent presentation, Brian. Thank you very much. The first question is about the outbound roaming scenario. As a home network, we don't want to rely on the visited network willingness to deploy your solution or similar. Even if we don't have we still have 2G, 3G, we have IMS network, but we are not ready for VoLTE roaming.
Yeah.
Do you think that would be, is your solution supporting this scenario where as a home network, I want to be able to, for my customer to be able to roam into VoLTE only networks, even if I didn't launch VoLTE roaming outbound yet?
That was a problem that we wanted to address at the very beginning. Is this a service for the home or the visited? We made the decision mainly based off of our 2 American customers because the rest of the world, frankly, wasn't really ready yet to sunset. They were more or less the pioneers. And so they believed the onus was more on them to consume this service and pay us for that, and obviously there's some payment that goes across to the home. But to your point, it's all about perspective. So we chose to sell this to the visited, so from their perspective, it's an inbound roaming service. We could take that same solution and sell it to a home operator. In their perspective, it's an outbound roaming solution. It's not the same as what I talked about. But Evolve Mobility Outbound is about sunsetting your network equipment. But for the 2G or non-VoLTE roaming home, we could change the perspective. We haven't done that yet, but we understand that there may be some opportunities out there, especially within group operators who might have a large umbrella of opcos that may want to benefit from that. So there's nothing technically that prevents us. It was a commercial decision at the beginning.
I have another question about the MVNOs and sponsor roaming scenario. Is this something that Evolve Mobility can support? So there are home operators which are having MVNOs behind, or they're providing sponsor roaming. How can you handle this type of?
Yes, so sponsor roaming is interesting because VoLTE has been a little slow with sponsor roaming, and we do have potential customers for the outbound product who rely on sponsor roaming. They need to have that one connection to reach the world. Our solution sits between the home and the sponsor. So to the sponsor, it still appears like everything is outbound as 3G, not as VoLTE. So they don't have to support VoLTE yet. It can be a 3G roaming relationship. Now we're working to see, okay, for those that do want to support a VoLTE to VoLTE through a sponsor, how that might be possible. So there's different ways of doing this, but right now our solution does not break sponsor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Brian. I agree. Very, very clear presentation. And I also think very interesting that we raise these different perspectives, because there are possibly other opportunities out there. But what are the prerequisites of the home operator, I'm thinking now? What do they need to procure from Syniverse?
The home, so for Evolve Mobility for inbound, like what we talked about with AT&T and Verizon, the home operator really does not have to, they don't procure anything from us. Now what they do have to do is, usually there is some IR21 that has some global titles that would represent, for example, our inner working functions. And their SMSC may also need to open up to send SMS traffic to our global title as opposed to the VPLMN. But commercially, there's nothing that the home has to procure. It's completely touch-free.
So nothing on the signaling, nothing on the clearing houses, nothing?
No, well, I mean, again, our customer in that use case is the VPLMN. We make it as that pay-as-you-grow model. Everything is included in that, including all the network connectivity. There is a prerequisite from the VPLMN that we need to be at least in the diameter flow. Now, we would prefer to be the diameter provider, but we don't have to be. As long as we 100% are in that diameter flow, that's the only requirement. We don't have to be your SS7 provider. We don't have to be your IPX provider, because we peer with the world. So we get the traffic no matter what. The only requirement, again, is the diameter flow.
You mentioned that you would be breaking down barriers. And what do you mean there? Is it barriers for MNOs to focus on 5G, or barriers in a mental approach to new setups? Or what do you mean?
Well, think about if we had not chosen to do what we did. No matter what, these US operators, they were on a road to 5G, and they, in some cases, said, come hell or high water, we're going to sunset. That would have been catastrophic to the world, because, now granted, one operator did manage to make a modification to their MME so that you could roam as data. But that's an anomaly. It's basically because the particular vendor supported a requirement that's not part of the spec. Part of the spec is this is a voice-centric device, meaning if you don't register for voice, you don't get data either. So that meant the whole world, a lot of it anyway, could not roam for data or voice. So I guess the barrier that I'm talking about is the conundrum operators are having. Well, do I go ahead and just say, that's it, we're sunsetting no matter what, and here's the catastrophe that's going to happen, and live with that? Or do we say, that gap goes away, you can focus now on 5G, and you don't have to worry about this. Your inbound roaming will stay, your customer experience will remain, and And I'll also just say one other thing. Some operators are choosing to rely on 2G fallback because US 2G pretty much already went away with the exception of one operator. I would just say that with this solution, they have that VoLTE roaming experience, which means they can maintain their data service at all times while on a high-quality call. If you rely on the 2G fallback, in my opinion, it's a degraded service because you either don't have very good 2G coverage. In some countries, they do, but in other cases, you don't have a data session during a 2G call. And how many times with our smartphones are we on a Zoom call or hailing an Uber or doing something? It's almost unfathomable now to not have data working on your device. So.
Thank you. And I think you've demonstrated the value here, but for how long would the value exist, would you say?
Well, it's a good point. And I'm not here to prevent VoLTE roaming. In fact, our team of global testers, while we're selling Evolve Mobility, they're going out there trying to help operators get bilaterals. So we're not trying to prevent that. However, the spark is there to innovate and to encourage operators to do more VoLTE roaming. But I still believe it's going to be many years before you have the majority. Probably most operators will say, we're going to focus on our top 10, top 20, right? Maybe they'll get up to 70, maybe 80% of their inbound roaming using their top VoLTE. But that long tail is going to exist for a long time. So then it just becomes a commercial decision. And what we do is we try to work with the operator to ensure that the revenues that they bring in far outweigh the cost that they have to pay for this service.
First of all, I want to thank you for your presentation and to underline that indeed, if it wasn't for your service, a lot of roamers would have been left without service in the US during the last year or so. However, I have always thought of your service as something which is paramount for an operator which does not support VoLTE roaming. But I thought, well, so if I support VoLTE roaming, there's no benefit for me there. And somehow during this presentation, I understood that maybe there is some value, even if I support VoLTE roaming already. But I failed to understand exactly which, because I was a bit lost in this visitor home thing.
So you may support VoLTE roaming to some markets, but there may be other markets that are sunsetting that you don't have a VoLTE roaming relationship with. And what I think my point was, sometimes that takes 6, 9 months, a year before you can establish these bilaterals. However, if you have a pressing date to sunset and you want to be able to have a VoLTE roaming experience, you can use our platform where the other side may still be, even if they're VoLTE as well, they still may be roaming in a 3G-like environment. And what we do is we interwork it and make it look like, from your perspective, it's all VoLTE. So the idea here is that let's just put it this way, about half of the HPLMNs we have on our platform have VoLTE at home. They have some VoLTE roaming relationships, but they don't have VoLTE roaming with our customers, AT&T and Verizon.
But as a home network, when my customers roam on a network which shut down 3G, my customer will use 2G, of course, if it's available.
If it's, yeah.
Somehow, I think we are working on the assumption that downgrading from 3 to 2, voice 3 to 2G will not be such a good experience, but they will survive. Also because our reference is the US, so it was no service. So it seems that 2G suddenly is a very good service. But what you're saying is that with your solution, I could offer VoLTE in any network with or without 3G.
Yes.
So VoLTE could be used even to improve the voice experience in countries where we know that international voice traffic is not, for instance, showing CLI or is showing less quality. For that, would it be a requirement that the visited network had an agreement with you, or the home network having an agreement with you would be enough?
Again, it's a matter of perspective, and Evolve Mobility for inbound, we would sell that to the VPLMN who's sunsetting their legacy RAN. So in the case where the VPLMN still had 2G around and they wanted to we're keeping 2G around, I encourage that under one assumption, for IoT. The reason I don't encourage that for voice-centric devices, human smartphones, is because of what I stated about simultaneous voice and data not working. And I think if you just try to imagine what it was like back in the 1990s, early 2000s, when, before we had real smartphones, when you made a phone call, that's all you did. Maybe you sent an SMS, but that's it. It was a singly threaded device. We don't use our phones that way anymore, and that's why I think using our platform, even if you're keeping 2G, leave your 2G for IoT, but use our platform for the human roamers, and that would also differentiate yourself if there's other operators in your market that are trying to do the same thing, just relying on 2G fallback.
But my question was in regards to us as a home network, not as visited. Yeah. As visited, we support all the technologies and VoLTE roaming. But I was thinking whether your service could be used for outbound as a way to improve the experience on voice, whether because due to a 3G shutdown or simply because of low quality on voice and expectation of higher quality on VoLTE.
Yeah, I think that kind of is along the lines of Annalie's earlier comment. We are looking at that as a solution, but originally the solution was geared towards the VPLMN. We've had a lot of comments, hey, would it be great if you could offer something like this for the HPLMN, and we're looking at that solution right now. But yes, so right now it is a VPLMN solution.
Okay, so we will not be a customer.
Well, today probably not, but again, we're looking at this.
My last question. Are you offering different cost models for the operators to have the solution, or you have only one model for this?
We try to be as flexible as we can. Right now, the model that typically works is it's simply based off of the number of unique roamers that you bring in, because the more unique roamers you bring in, the more revenue you bring in, and as the roamers go up, you get efficiencies of scale and you pay less per unique roamer. We've also entertained a revenue share type of arrangement, but it's a little different. The reason is that something I didn't mention in my talk because I didn't know if I'd have time is that one of the side benefits of Evolve Mobility for inbound is that your own outbound rates, you get cost savings if you can bring in a lot of inbound roaming. So you have to be careful, because if you really reduce your inbound roaming to get the outbound, then if we did a revenue share, that would be harmful.
So why you are using it based on unique subscribers? Why you're not making, for example, based on usage, the more data usage? Because maybe I have 10 subscribers that make usage more than 100 subscribers. So why you are not using the model of using the volumes instead of the unique subscribers?
Great question. We looked at, do we want to consider data consumption as part of the commercials? We decided against it, mainly because even though we're, in some cases, enabling data roaming when they couldn't have it because a voice-centric device was not able to roam, we determined that really we needed to focus on what we're providing, which is essentially VoLTE. So we didn't want to get in the mix of, well, this particular subscriber is a heavy data usage, and so we should get more money from that. a user's a user regardless of the data usage from our perspective.
This is offered as a managed service, and the model is per roamer basis. Is that? Yeah.
Yes, and that grows like even right now, right? So it's May. We expect by the end of May, early June, roaming's going to go up because of summer travel, right? February, it's going to go down. So in the months that you see less roaming, you pay less. In the months you see more roaming, you pay more. But of course, you benefit from that, from your own
So
roaming revenue.
Even if they don't use voice calls, right, in the VCT network, the VCT network is still charged for the service because they have X amount of roamers. Is that?
If there are some roamers that are strictly data only. They don't register for voice at all. So for example, if they're an IoT, there are other roamers that are voice-centric devices that actually never make a phone call. We still charge for that mainly because, number one, we're providing a service that enables them to stay attached for data, which brings in revenue. And number two, a lot of times they're heavy SMS users. And so by latching on for VoLTE, they're able to do voice over SMS as well. I'm sorry, SMS over IP as well.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Brian.
Thank you.
We have a question in the audience. So we can have one question because I think we are, here first with the gentleman with the blue jumper. Sorry, Chris, we'll come back to you.
Hello, I'm Francesco from Vodafone. The question is about the billing reconciliation. Do you need to do anything for that?
Are you referring to the TAP reconciliation? So we are a full data clearinghouse, but we don't require you to be our customer. We can do the reconciliation on your behalf. We can also send CDRs directly to you. We have an operator that requests that. And we can also send a TAP file that just has the minutes of use and SMS usage to you to then merge with your TAP to your own provider. So it all just depends on how end-to-end you want it. We can do it all for you, or we can just facilitate the means for you to leverage your own clearinghouse provider.
One last question from Chris.
Hi. So 2 out of the 3 carriers in the US use your solution, right? Which means that the third uses their own. Is that correct?
Yes and no. So
well, let me finish my question.
I'll be careful what I say, but they are working on a solution. My understanding is it's very nascent. There's very little roamers right now. So I think the majority, if the vast majority, is leveraging the 2G fallback for that one carrier.
Yeah, so let me finish my question then. So if I understand it correctly, your solution is a hosted IMS network plus an interworking function plus some billing and testing, that kind of stuff.
Yes.
If you are a visitant network where you are building an IMS core anyway for your 4 and 5G network, why wouldn't you do this yourself then?
Well, because that is essentially a local breakout solution. And in the VoLTE roaming world, it's S8 home routed. So you think about it, you're an operator who wants to move fully into 5G and bring as many VoLTE roamer partners as possible. A VoLTE roaming partner means the home breaks out the IMS, the home breaks out the PSTN. Now, if you're bringing it on as a VPLMN, you're doing local breakout. You're not doing S8, which means if you want to convert that inner working roamer to a true bilateral, you're probably going to have to retest all over again. So I think it's inefficient, basically because the way VoLTE roaming works today.
But I'm afraid then I didn't express myself clearly. So what if, for example, AT&T would take your solution and put it inside their domain? They do the interworking between the signaling. They do the IMS core network that you also have, which you already have. What would be the difference?
Who manages it? I mean, AT&T, obviously part of any VPLMN that wants to march forward to 5G, they want to focus their attention there. What we're providing is interworking between the VoLTE environment and the non, they're happy to get rid of that 3G, right? They want to move away from that. So if they have to manage it themselves, and I'm not saying that it's the wrong choice, I think everybody has different opinions, but it just means that now the onus is on them to manage it. So that's the main reason.
Great.